Hi, I'm Ollie Brotherhood, and I am a director and director of photography. I've worked on commercials for Razer, Blackmagic design. I've done bits for the Royal Navy and Top Gear. I also work on narrative pieces and branded content. Today we're going to a little restaurant called Flower and Grape, and we're going to be shooting a high-paced social media promo video in their restaurant, in an active restaurant. This is going to be a really high-paced shoot. We have no real control over what people are going to be doing and where they're going to be going. We're just going to be capturing what's happening as it happens. It's completely run and gun. So I think the best way to start would be to show you what I bring and why. The main rig that we're going to be using today is this, which is a Blackmagic design URSA Mini Pro G2. It's a pretty big and bulky camera. The reason that I like to use a camera like this is because, firstly, the fact that it is actually quite heavy is very helpful for when you're shooting handheld, as it gets rid of a lot of the micro jitters that you can get with lighter rigs. So with this, you can get 3 points of contact, be really firm with it, and kind of shoot with it like this. You can brace up against your chest, and then you can really control the movement nicely and get a really natural, organic looking handheld, as opposed to that kind of shaky cam look that you can occasionally get with lighter setups. Another thing that I particularly like about this camera system is the internal ND filters. Again, when we have very high-paced shoots and shoots where you're having to work really quickly, the ability to flip NDs without having to change filters is incredibly valuable. All down this side is all the key functions of the camera. So again, when you're working in high-paced environments, being able to access ways to change the image quickly without having to dig through menu systems is really valuable. It's also equipped with a lot of industry standard inputs and outputs. So believe it or not, this is probably about as small as this camera would be rigged for me. On bigger commercials and other larger shoots, I would normally be running Teradex and all sorts of wireless follow focus systems, and being able to power those things and have the outputs from the camera to them, and have things like time code when you're working with a sound team is really, really important for scaling up to larger productions, and that is the sort of thing that a camera like this offers. So yeah, that's really why I choose this camera ergonomically. But then when it comes to the reason why I actually shoot on Blackmagic design cameras, it mainly comes down to the color science. I just love the way that the colors look straight out of the camera. Skin tones are always just really natural, and they look really neutral and nice. And the beauty of the Blackmagic design RAW codec, which is what all these cameras shoot in, is that you can do a lot of pushing and pulling in post to get the image to where you want it to be. And you've got a lot of information and data there to be able to do creative things in the color grade without the image breaking down and falling apart. So depending on the shoot, I make choices between whether or not I'm going to opt for using zooms or using primes. Tends to be on commercials or on narrative things. When you have a lot more control as a director of photography, you use primes. It's funny, when I'm shooting with primes, it makes me think about what focal length I'm going to choose a lot more, which is almost a mindset that it puts you in as a director of photography. But with that being said, today we were using zooms because, again, when you're in a high-paced environment, you just don't want to be swinging lenses. You don't want to be doing lens swaps or wishing that you had a certain lens when a key moment is happening. So I'm using a 20 to 55, which covers a lot of really great focal lengths within that range. And this is a T2.8 lens. I think I spent most of the day shooting wide open, and that gives you a shallow enough depth of field that allows you to separate what you're filming from the background. Because again, when we're working in these run and gun environments, I don't really have too many options on ways to separate my subject from the environment around them. My job as a director of photography really is to pick out a subject and make it clear who you're supposed to focus on as the viewer. Normally you would do that via light and composition, but when you're in a run and gun environment, you kind of lose access to the lighting part. to a certain degree, and you also can't really control what the people are going to be doing, so you have to use every tool in the toolbox to really separate them, and using shallow depth of field is a great way to do it, and then also finding frames within frames is the goal. With that being said, we are going to be shooting an interview today, so that in that situation, I'll probably take the zoom lens off and swing to a prime, which will just allow me to get a slightly shallower depth of field, again, commit to a focal length that I like, and also enjoy the nice characteristics of the set of primes that I have. So when I approach a shoot like this, I have a rough idea in my mind as to how I want it to go. The rough plan for this shoot is to capture some establishing shots of the actual location, and then from there, storytelling wise, I almost want to tell the story of a dish or the process of creating a dish from start to finish. It needs to resolve in some way. I'm going to be immediately looking for footage of people prepping things, people getting things ready, getting the base elements prepared, and I'm going to be capturing those in as many different ways as possible, getting as much shot variety as possible, mixing between stationary shots and slightly higher energy handheld shots, a variety of different focal lengths, and then from there I'm just going to keep a mental bank as much as I possibly can of what I've captured, and try and start fitting that into a little sequence into my head. That all of that combined should hopefully tell the story of what the restaurant is. Because if you're making a promo for a company, then you're effectively telling the story of that company, and you need to try and get that across to the viewer. And that is the guidebook that I approach almost every shoot with. So plan of action, I guess capture as much as possible of them prepping, and try and capture all the good vibes and everything like that are in the kitchen, and then work on kind of creating some form of narrative through it. Yeah, just try and capture some form of storyline and find something in the clips that I can capture. So I guess one of the most important things about shooting a promo film is to actually make sure that you film at least some of the logo or the name of the business. So I always like to kind of capture these sorts of shots for safety, just like a little swing back and forth. But I'm also very aware that it looks completely ridiculous to be doing this sort of thing. So when you're shooting in a dynamic style, like I like to do, it's always then good to mix in some shots that are still, so that you can break up the dynamism essentially, and actually it grounds it more. Yeah, I mean, I guess for me it's all about a mixture of both camera movement and then non-camera movement. So right now I'm capturing some of the establishing stationary wides, and I tend to do these first because I naturally get really excited when I'm shooting handheld and doing all the dynamic stuff, and then forget to do them at the end. So I've learned to do these at the start because they're a really good thing to mix into the edit to break up all of the handheld clips and all of the fast-paced movement. So then you can like slow it down a notch and add breathing room to the edit. Because when it comes to making a film, it's all about pacing and making sure that the edit is paced and it has like breaks in action. And you can do that using camera movement and then stopping the camera movement. I don't even know if this might be a specific to me tip, but I'll never cut the camera until I've dropped it, because sometimes it's really useful to use those fast motion blur clips and big sweeping camera movements to actually increase the flow of an edit, increase the energy of an edit. You never know when you're going to need them. So now we're going to shoot the interview. It's going to be taking place here, and I'm going to be shooting across like this. The reason that I've chosen this location is because there is a very nice big window here, and then all these mirrors, and there's just lots of opportunities for depth. I'm shooting into the L of the room, which creates the most depth for a shot because everything is kind of converging to a point. And this massive window here is going to motivate the light from this light box. So the idea is that when the person is sat here in their interview, it's not obvious that we've lit it. In theory, your brain should be tricked into thinking that this window is actually throwing all of the light onto the interviewee. And yeah, if you can look for things like this in the locations that you're filming in, then it's going to save you a lot, because if you're fighting the location, it makes it 1,000 times harder. So you might as well try and work with it. We were shooting in like a backlight situation there, which is really where stuff like the Blackmagic design cameras shine, because they have high amounts of dynamic range. So you've got a lot of information between the brightest parts of the image and the darkest parts of the image. And that information gives you a lot of room to play with the image in the edit. Okay, so we are back, and that was a lot of fun. It was pretty intense. It was cool to be in an active kitchen. They are just as chaotic as you see in the films, which is a challenge as a filmmaker. You're having to squeeze in there, and you're having to find frames quickly, and you're having to find compositions fast, get them, and then move on before you get moved on, I guess. In terms of how that related to the kit that I brought with me, I guess the main thing about any Blackmagic design camera is that there is nothing that is going to help you. There's no automatic features on the camera, there's no automatic exposure, there's no autofocus. I'm using fully manual lenses, which for me in that situation is actually incredibly helpful. Because I've used these cameras for such a long time, I know where to expose them to get a good looking image, and I am very comfortable pulling focus myself and picking what I want to be in focus and what I don't want to be in focus. So I like the fact that they are fully manual. I'm constantly having to make choices, but that's the way that I would like it. I find it difficult to work with autofocus systems, and I do think in an environment like that, even with really intelligent autofocus, it would pick and choose potentially things that I don't want it to focus on. And those are choices, those are creative choices that I want to make, and that is why I personally really enjoy how manual these cameras are. So I guess a place where something like a Blackmagic design cinema camera comes really in handy and can save you a little bit is in high dynamic range situations. So for example, in our interview, we had a big bright window behind our subject, and then I had placed our subject in a quite dark corner so that the light from the window and the light that we had set up would wrap around his face and contrast against the dark background. The thing is, I can do that sort of thing because the dynamic range of my camera allows me to do it. If I tried to do that on a camera with much less dynamic range, then you're going to run into issues of the window being completely blown out and overexposed, and then the dark corner being crunchy and noisy, and the image will break down and just wouldn't look that good. So this is where high dynamic range situations is really the bread and butter of the cinema cameras, and I like to put these cameras in those situations a lot because they always look really beautiful. I always like to make the most of the dynamic range because the contrast is what I look for as a director of photography, and having the ability to do it and having a tool that allows me to do that is key to my style as a cinematographer. Right, that's gone really well. I've really enjoyed myself. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much to Wex for having me today, and also to the restaurant for allowing us to film in there. And I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you again soon.